My name is David St. Pierre. I'm a docent here at the MissionInn Museum, and we're volunteers for the museum. The model that you're standing in front of is a model of the MissionInn as it stands today. This was made from students at Cal Poly Pomona, and they donated it to the museum probably about 1985. This U-shaped section right here in the front is called the Mission Wing. It was completed in 1903. The section there in the corner, it's called the Cloister Wing. It was completed in 1910, 1911. This L-shaped section here was completed in 3 sections. The ground floor, the first and second floor about 1914, 1915. The next floor up about 1923, and the very, very top floor called Author's Row was completed in 1927. And finally, the last corner of the block was called the Rotunda Wing, and it was completed in 1931. It is a working hotel. Most people think it's one of the 21 California missions. It's never been a mission. It's always been a hotel. The clock face that you see there on the wall is called an Anton clock. It was carved in Nuremberg, Germany in 1709. The clock face was brought inside the museum about 1985 to preserve it, and a replica face was created, and it sits where the original clockworks are, and I'll show you that later on in the tour. The structure that you see right here on the wall is called a rain cross. This was developed by Frank Miller, who built the hotel, and his first architect named Arthur Benton. They designed that to be the logo of the MissionInn, and the double-barred cross at the top is an Indian symbol for rain. It's also known as the dragonfly, and the bottom structure with the mission bell is significant of a California mission, and it's called the rain cross, and you'll see it all over the city of Riverside and around the MissionInn. The wooden structure that you're walking underneath is called a pergola. This was actually restored pergola. The original pergola is down around the corner a little bit, and I'll show you where it is. But it actually ran out to the sidewalk and up 4 blocks to the train station, so you could get off the train, walk underneath Frank Miller's pergola to his hotel. This is Frank Augustus Miller. He was born in 1857, and he died in 1935 at the age of about 78. He's the man that built the hotel, and he came to Riverside when he was 17 years old. His parents were going to send him off to college, but he didn't like school very much, and so he asked his parents if he could stay and work the family business. They had a 2-story, 12-room adobe house right in the middle of this courtyard where their swimming pool is, and that was their family business and their home. Frank worked the business for the next 10 years. In 1880, he married one of the school teacher tutors who was a tutor in his boarding house, his parents' boarding house, and she became his wife in 1880. The family ran the business for the next 10 years until Frank Miller decided he was going to build what's known as a destination hotel, a very large hotel where people would come and spend 3 and 4 months at a time during the winters. They'd leave the winters of New England and come to Riverside and spend 3 and 4 months here in sunny Southern California. Frank Miller was not very rich. He wasn't like Hearst that had a lot of money for the publishing company. So a lot of things he purchased for the hotel were bought on a lot of his travels and trips. And these are 2 things he purchased on one of his trips to San Francisco. These are Spanish garrison cannons. They came actually from the Philippines, and companies would ship these wares basically to the exposition. It was the Pan American Exposition commemorating the opening of the Panama Canal in 1915. The country didn't want to ship them back home, so they put them up for sale. And Frank Miller purchased both of these cannons. One's from the late 1700s, the other's from the early 1800s. They've never been fired. They've moved around the hotel quite a bit. At one point, they sat along the street out here, which is known as 7th Street. It's now called MissionInn Avenue. And the parents would stop their cars, and the children would get out of the cars and sit on top of the cannons and have their picture taken. So you can see how the tops are quite shiny from the children sitting on the cannons and having their picture taken. The plaques behind me are indicating the hotel is a National Historic Landmark. The plaque on the left is indicating it's landmark number 1 with the city of Riverside. The center plaque is indicating it's a state-recognized historic landmark in 1961. And the plaque on the right is indicating it's a nationally recognized historic landmark in 1977. It's actually one of 6 landmark hotels here in California. 2 of them are in Yosemite, the Wawona and the Iwani. There's one in Santa Clara, one in Santa Monica, the Del Coronado in San Diego, and the MissionInn here, right here in Riverside. I told you this was never a mission. Frank Miller wanted you to think it was a mission, so a lot of the architecture copies some of the missions around California. And this is a copy of the Campanario, or bell tower, that you would see at Mission San Gabriel. Frank Miller would actually dress up in monk's clothes and go down to the train station and entice people to get off the train and come to stay at his MissionInn. One of the things Frank Miller liked collecting was bells, and at one point he had about 800 bells in his collection. This is the largest bell in the collection. It's called the Nanking Temple Bell. It came from a temple that was destroyed in Nanking, China. It took it about 2 years to get here by boat. It weighs about 2,000 pounds and is about 6.5 feet tall. I'm going to tell you a story about a man that wanted to buy this bell when we get into the chapel. This is one of 4 restaurants here at the hotel. It's called Las Campanas. Las Campanas means the bells. Inside the restaurant you see some of the original pergola that was from when the hotel was built. This is actually steel tubes covered with concrete and formed to make it look like logs. It's actually not logs, it's actually concrete formed to make it look like logs. We're going to walk around the corner right here and I'm going to show you some of the architecture outside the MissionInn that has a lot of history around the city, and then we'll go back inside and I'll show you the lobby. So Frank Miller used to travel to Europe, and he would actually ask people if he could buy their wrought iron gates and fences, and actually people would sell it to him. So as we walk down the sidewalk, you can look at the wrought iron fence and all the metal that's in this the fence here, and it was actually brought from Europe, and not one piece is the same. All the wrought iron is different pieces of wrought iron, and it was built specifically for each piece. So most people think Frank Miller was Catholic, but he actually wasn't Catholic. He was a Congregationalist, and that is his church on the corner. That is the first Congregational church of Riverside. It was built in 1913, 1914. And Frank Miller's second architect, who designed the Spanish wing of the hotel, is the architect that designed that church. Right next door to the church is the original post office and federal building for the city of Riverside. Then it became the police station, and now it is the Metropolitan Museum of Riverside. And directly across the street, if you look above the wrought iron gates, it says City Hall. That was the first city hall built for the city of Riverside, built in 1925. Riverside actually became a city in 1893, but they didn't build their first building until this building was built in 1925. And if you look directly across the street,
the archives of GXT
Chinese pavilion that was placed there in 1987 to commemorate the Chinese workers that came to Riverside to help grow oranges. Riverside was the richest city in the country per capita because of orange groves. We had about 20,000 acres of orange groves here in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So I told you a lot about Frank Miller and how he loved collecting things. When he was in San Francisco, when he bought those cannons, he also bought anchor chain. This was anchor chain off of the ships that were left in the San Francisco harbor during the gold rush era. And scavengers went out and scavenged everything they could off the ships and put it up for sale. And Frank Miller bought many, many feet of anchor chain. Before we go inside, I'm going to point out the different style of architecture and different wings on this side of the block. This again is the Mission Wing, built in 1903, wooden construction, stucco exterior, Mission Revival style of architecture. There's the beginning of the second wing. It's called the Cloister Wing. It is unreinforced concrete. It has since been reinforced during the renovation of the hotel in the mid-80s, but completely different style of building material and completely different style of architecture. That wing was built in 1910, 1911, and it is called the Cloister Wing. Originally it was going to be called the Monastery Wing, but there's no chapel or cathedral in the wing, so they actually changed the name to the Cloister because that's the section of the monastery where the sleeping quarters are. This is the lobby of the MissionInn. This is, again, the first section of the MissionInn to be built, and when this wing was built, this was the largest room in the hotel. It was actually a 2-bedroom suite with 2 bedrooms up on the upper deck and living room, dining room down on the lower deck. And we'll go in there in a second and I'll show it to you. But all the presidents on the wall are presidents who have visited the hotel or actually came for some kind of an event or dinner party or something like that. The 2 presidents on the left-hand side I call drive-by presidents. They actually never stepped foot inside the MissionInn because it didn't exist then. The only thing that existed was the original adobe house that the family built in the 1870s. Benjamin Harrison was here in 1890 when he was traveling through Riverside. His carriage stopped in front of the original adobe house. Frank Miller's daughter took a bouquet of flowers and a basket of oranges out to him, and so his portrait went on the wall. William McKinley was here in 1880 when he was governor of Ohio. He too did not even step out of his carriage. He just stopped in front of the original adobe house, and Frank said he was here, so his portrait went on the wall. First president to ever stay here at the hotel was Theodore Roosevelt in 1903, and he stayed right inside this room, and after that point this became known as the Presidential Suite for many, many years. Going down the wall, President Taft was here in 1909. He did not spend the night here. He was here for about 5 hours for a dinner party that was held here. And there's a famous chair down here on the lobby floor that I'm going to show you in a minute. President Hoover was here when he was Secretary of the Interior. He was traveling through Riverside to go out to the Colorado River where they were going to build a new dam along the Colorado River called the Hoover Dam. President Kennedy was here when he was a student at Stanford in 1940. He was here actually twice. He was here for a peace conference that was held. He was representing his father Joseph, who worked for the UN. More recently, in 1997, President Ford was here for a fundraiser for Mary Bono. She took the seat of her late husband's congressional seat out in the Palm Springs area, and there was a fundraiser here held for her, and President Ford was here for that visit. President Reagan and Nancy spent their first night of their honeymoon at the hotel. They didn't get married at the hotel. They were married at the Little Brown Chapel in the San Fernando Valley. They came to Riverside, spent the first night of their honeymoon here at the hotel, and then they moved on to Phoenix the next morning to see her parents. And more recently, again, through both election cycles, President Bush was here in 2000 and 2003. The last time he was here, he stayed in the newest suite of the hotel called the Keeper of the Inn Suite. And it's at the very end of the tour, and I'll show you where it's at. And last but not least, President Nixon was here. He's probably the best known president to ever be at the hotel because he was born in Yorba Linda. His mother lived in Whittier, and his aunt and uncle lived here in Riverside. So he came here every summer, and he played around the Mission Inn as a child. He was also married at the hotel. If you ever watched the movie Nixon by Oliver Stone, it was filmed here at the hotel. But it shows them coming out of our chapel that you'll see later in the tour, but they weren't married at the chapel. They were married right inside this room, inside the presidential suite. Let's go take a look.